Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength Podcast. Hey everyone, it is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and today I'm talking with my good friend Seth Munsey. Seth is the head strength and conditioning coach for the PDGA, the Professional Disc Golf Association, but he's also a lot more than that. Seth was once a member of the United States Coast Guard and a paramedic in California, and along with that, he has accumulated his fair share of trauma. And Seth is just here today to share his story and to let people know that they do not have to suffer alone when it comes to their mental health. This is a great conversation that you may find helpful, if not encouraging. All right, so Seth, recently I've noticed you've been making some posts on Facebook about mental health and about your past in the Coast Guard. Seems like you have a new mission or a new purpose right now. What's going on?
Yeah, I do, and it's something, Tim, that it's been inside of me for so long to want to share my story, not really to help break down the stigma of mental health, surrounding mental health, which we all know that there's a stigma, and for years and years, I mean, we've been saying, oh, there's a stigma surrounding mental health, there's a stigma surrounding mental health, but I'm like, what are we actually doing, like, to break down that stigma? What are the stories that we're sharing or not sharing? What are the lessons we're learning or not learning? And that I've got a long background with trauma and tragedy, and I know we'll touch on that in this podcast today. But that's a mission. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and something that really was spoke deeply to me was to share that story this month and beyond this month, but to use this month as that catalyst to start to help break down that stigma and change the conversation around mental health.
So you mentioned that like you had some traumas in the past and things. And so you used to work with the Coast Guard.
Yes. And the ambulance and the reserve firefighter.
You've had a lot of first responder experience then.
Yeah, I've had about almost 9 years. It was 4 years in the military, and so in the Coast Guard, my job was search and rescue and law enforcement in the San Francisco Bay. So we were the primary law enforcement search and rescue response, and that was from 99 to 03. And so a lot happened during those 4 years. We had the whole year 2000 that we thought everything was going to change, on midnight at year 2000. And then we had, sorry, there's people talking in the background. Then we had 9/11. Obviously, we had a lot of other things happen during those 4 years there. And then after that, I went to the fire academy and went and started working for an ambulance company doing 911 down in Southern California. Spent a couple of years on there and as a reserve firefighter. So a lot of tragedy, a lot of trauma that we see, and definitely want to touch on that throughout this call.
So with some of the stuff you've seen, and I can imagine because I used to be a firefighter and, we were first responders, and as a firefighter, it seems like 90% of your calls are EMS calls. So you've seen some just stuff that you would hope normal people would never get to see. How did you manage those? Like, how did you cope with the calls that you went on and the things you had to do?
Yeah, I coped with them very well. And at the moment, until I didn't, years later. And there's a great quote that I heard from a Tim Ferriss podcast a long time ago. He didn't originate this quote, but it said that they tried to bury us, they didn't know we were seeds. And so when it comes to the stuff that I saw, I buried it. In one of my recent Facebook posts, I talked about 2 days after I got to the Coast Guard station, I pulled my first bridge jumper out of the water of the San Francisco Bay. And I was 18 years old. I was fresh out of high school, and I pulled this lady's body out of the water. She fell 220 feet, close to 80 miles per hour. And here I am, a young person, and I'm having to deal with this tragic, traumatic scene. And I look around me, and the other people around me, they've all done the same drill. And I just looked at cues. What did they do? They didn't do nothing. They just stood there. They just, so that's what I did. I just thought, hey, this is my job. This is what I signed up for. And little did I know that was going to be something of how I handled most situations in the future. That was good training for me, because as I was talking to my therapist recently about the stuff that I did to push it down, to not think about it, to move on to the next thing, that made me really good at my job. It made me be able to, show up and help people, and help impact people's lives positively in many cases, because people were in their worst, the worst days of their lives, and we're showing up to help. And so he became really good at doing that. And then years later, way after I got off the ambulance, way after I got out of EMS, is I started to develop the symptoms of PTSD. So you don't really think about it, right? I know you're experienced in firefighting. Like when you show up, you just do it. You just do the job, and you don't think about it. You don't think about it afterwards as well. But and whether you work in EMS or you don't, we all see trauma, we all see tragedy, and we kind of get the cues from looking around at other people around us. And in our culture, especially, we don't really express pain and express our true feelings to people. And so we get those cues, oh, I don't hear my family talk about, or my friends talk about their trauma or their pain or their hurts. And so I probably shouldn't talk about mine. And, so we're conditioned to kind of to push things down, whether you work in EMS or you don't.
So I'm assuming through that 9 years, you probably buried a lot of seeds.
Oh, yeah.
So how you said later, much later, they started to, I guess, well, you didn't say it this way, but they started to sprout. What
Yep.
kind of things started happening?
Yeah. So the first thing, I was working, I had a gym. I owned a gym for a number of years. And I was sitting one day, just the gym was closed in the middle of the day, lunch period, and I was talking to my coach, one of my coaches there. And out of nowhere, all of a sudden I felt this like sensation in my chest. Like I felt this thing, like this drop in my chest. I felt like my heart like almost felt like it was skipping a major beat. And like I had no idea, and I what was going on, and my world started to close in around me, and I started to feel like I was getting blurry vision, and I started to feel like hyper focused on what was going on inside my body, and I thought I was dying. And so my coach was like, Seth, you're white, what's going on? And I was like, I don't know, call 911. And so it called 911, went to the hospital in the back of an ambulance. And here I spent so many times taking people to the hospital, in those kind of situations. And so I go to the hospital, they do a full workup. I'm there one night. They have no idea what's going on. They think, hey, maybe something happened with your heart. We don't know. Do a bunch of tests. Everything's fine. A couple of days later, boom, happens again. I think, man, I've got some serious heart issue. I don't know what's going on. Uh, and but I made it through it. And it was about 5 months before I realized it was panic attacks, and that it was more related to like PTSD. I really thought something was going on with my heart. And um and and looking back on the ambulance, my time on the ambulance, how many people I took to the hospital that were having issues where we had no idea what was going on, and it may have been panic, or even the times that I heard people say I've got anxiety. And my thoughts about that, about people who had anxiety or who had panic attacks, it was like, come on, we got to go pick this person up again and take them to the hospital again. But when it was happening to me, I was like, this is crazy. I got to the point, Tim, where I was having panic attacks every day, multiple times a day. And I was having like anxiety, and I was having like I couldn't sleep. And my amygdala was just like on fire. My amygdala was just burning hot. And it was just anything that was a trigger, could be a trigger, was a trigger for me. And I couldn't stop it. And it was irrational. And I knew it was irrational, but even though it was irrational, what was happening, these symptoms, I couldn't get rid of them. And so that started back in 15 is when I had my first panic attack.
Wow. So you thought you were having heart trouble. What made you start to think that it was like anxiety, or did you just run through all your options and that's what it was?
Yeah, I went through like I was at a baseball game that my wife took me to, me and my two daughters. We were living in Northern California. We went up to see the Angels and the A's play because I'm an Angels fan. And I was there for my birthday, had a great time, and we're driving back, and my wife's driving, and all of a sudden, boom, I feel this like weird sensation, and I'm like, oh great, like this is crazy, I'm having this thing again with my heart, I have no idea. So I pulled up on YouTube, and I just typed in like, you know I can't remember exactly the words I typed in, but something came up with a YouTube of someone describing their panic attacks, and I thought maybe I'm having a panic attack. Like it never even entered my mind before. And once I started to look more into it, I thought, okay, I think this is more something's going on up here more than something down in here. And so I contacted a therapist, and like that confirmed it. It was panic attacks. It was rooted in PTSD. I had no idea where it was coming from, and found out that it was deep rooted PTSD from childhood, but a lot of my experiences working in EMS. And I've since then come to find out how prevalent it is in the first responder community, in the medical community as a whole, but really like that the first responder community, fire, EMS, police, military, all that. Like it's it it's more prevalent than we even know, because there's such a stigma of people not talking about their mental health.
I remember we went on a call, and I'm sure like you, like there are some that just stick in my head. The sounds, the sights, like everything about it is like it was crystallized forever. Like, and it's as if I'm there, I could be there right now. And
Yep.
it's really amazing how much of an imprint those scenes and those situations can leave in you, and you do go on about your business, but yet they're there just as crystal clear as the day. And there was one in particular when we got back to the station. The captain brought in a counselor for a critical incident stress debriefing, but the last thing I
Mhm.
wanted to do was talk about it. Like it was, I just didn't want to be there. I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So, and that was just, one time, but so I can totally relate to taking people in an ambulance that are having a panic attack and just not being able to relate to them in that moment. Like, because it's so foreign, especially if like this, what are they worried about? What are they panicking about? Like, you just don't know until you know.
Yeah.
Like, if
Yeah.
until you experience it, then it becomes a totally different reality or perception. That you're like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we and all of us experience trauma in our lives, but we don't know how to process it. We haven't been taught, most of us haven't been taught how to process trauma, where we are shielded from a lot of the pains of the world, a lot of us, right? And from a early age. And so we don't know how to process it. We don't know how to talk about it. We don't know how to move forward with it, and through it, right? And that's challenging. We see we see what other people are going through, but we just can't relate to them. Like I was talking to someone recently, he was just like he was like, hey, he's like, I know that I had a really good upbringing, and I can't, in my 32 years really say that I've ever experienced any sort of trauma. He goes, I just can't understand, like I can't relate to what you're taught, like your experience and how you're saying, PTSD and stuff. He goes, it's just not something I can relate to. I said, totally. I said, but if I was to say like I broke my, shoulder, or I broke my hip or something, have you ever broken your hip? He's like, no. I'm like, but could you imagine how bad that would be? He's like, oh yeah. He goes, I can imagine, like, that would suck so bad, and the recovery and everything you got to do. So he can relate, because he can, you can relate more to those kind of things. But mental health is still a wound. I have a shirt that I'm not wearing now. I should have worn it, but it says, uh not all wounds are visible. And
Mhm.
it's hard for people to relate to that. But if we look in our culture, Tim, like, there's other cultures around the world, they have rituals when there's traumatic experiences. They have rituals when there's death in in the family, or in the friends, or in the tribe, or whatever. There's rituals surrounding things. They have words in other languages that they can just say the word and people know what that means. Like, it's a deep meaning word that you can't really translate into English, and they really can't say exactly what it means, but they know that when someone is going through this process, or that word, it's something is deep inside, that person is hurting deeply, or they're going through something. So our language and everything that we have, in our culture, it kind of pushes us away from being able to experience and understand what's going on in the self, what's going on in the mind, and being able to relate to others. I said in my post, in one of my Facebook posts, that, like, we will go and we will watch a movie that's full of trauma and death and heartbreak and terror, and we'll do all that. We'll pay good money to watch it, and we'll see them win awards, but we won't want to hear the trauma that our friends and our family are going through, or we wouldn't want to share that. It's like, hey, like, I if I went with somebody, we watched a movie, and they're pulling a bridge jumper out of the water, probably be like, oh man, that's crazy. But I would, to me, turn to them and say, hey, do you want to hear about all my experiences and the trauma that I had from seeing pulling people out of the water? They'd be like, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know if I want to, I don't know if I want to sit there and listen to your trauma and your tragedy from actually being the person there pulling that bridge jump out of the water. And I'm not expecting them to, but, to want to do that. But it's just to recognize that mental health is something that we all need to be aware of. We need to take care of, and not feel ashamed to have these thoughts, these feelings, these reactions to what we go through.
I've never really thought about not having enough depth and texture in our language to convey, like certain meanings like that. That makes a lot of sense. And to your point also, but we're so isolated, right? Like everybody, like there's the you that I see, but there's also the you that I just don't know, right? Like
Hmm.
we all keep this distance between ourselves and other people as far as expressing our experiences, our emotions, or whatever. Like, what's the only right answer if somebody says, hey, how's it going? Like, there's only
Yeah.
really one answer they're looking for, and really they don't care. And the only answer you think you're going to give anyway is, pretty good. It's all right. I mean, but you're
Yeah.
never going to, like, if the worst thing in your life is happening to them, still rarely would you venture to tell them about it, which may be very
Yep.
helpful for you to let some of that out, that pressure and that steam out, so to speak. But
Yep.
we just don't like getting close to people. You know what I mean? Like, we try to make
Yep.
islands out of ourselves when we're not supposed to be isolated at all.
Well, yeah, and the thing, right? Like, in going back to our culture, our upbringing, like, we shield each other. We're shielded from a lot of trauma and a lot of pain. And other cultures around the world, they're not. There's a lot of lived realities that they have that we don't. Like, I was thinking about it. Like, we lived in Las Vegas recently, for a little bit, just in Henderson, right next door to it. And we took my kids, my two daughters, who are 9 and 12, we took them out on the strip one night, and we're walking, and there's a lot of homeless people or houseless people. I don't know, that's the, like, newer term. Like, there's, like, out there, and there's a lot of pain and suffering on some of those streets. And I told Tiffany, I said, I kind of don't want to shield the girls to this, because this is reality. Like, I like, for them, because there's other parts around the world where they're walking through slums. I mean, there's kids playing in areas where there's so much heartbreak and pain and I don't want to shield my girls from seeing that the only thing in the world is happy, and and the fun things that we do, that there is another side to the lived experience of humans. And so the more we think about that, and the more we can embrace that, that life is, there's a lot more to life than just what we're trying to achieve in our life and our goals, and what we're in being positive and pushing forward through things, that it's okay to not be okay. That's, I've heard that phrase used a lot of times, and I say it now too a lot, is it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel things deeply, and it's okay to know that others around you are feeling things deeply and affecting people. Our in a recent post, my last post that I just did, was I talked about my mother-in-law, and
Mm.
she was 56 years old. It was the day after Mother's Day, January 2020. And we all had celebrated a great Mother's Day together, and my wife and my mother-in-law were like, they were best friends. And went to bed that night and woke up in the morning. My father-in-law said, Seth, come here. Went up there, and my mother-in-law was deceased. She had a blood clot that she had no idea, DVT, deep vein thrombosis, that broke off and went to her lungs and became a pulmonary embolism. And so here I am. I run up there, and I love my mother-in-law deeply. I've been with that family since I was 20, and I'm 40 now. And I'm doing CPR on my mother-in-law. And I've done CPR on so many people. I can't even count how many times I've done it. But I jumped in and I did it. And and the thing is, like, after that experience, and being there, and to see her die so young at 56, and then to be isolated because it was COVID, and not be able to go out or do anything. But I still had to work. Like, I still had to do a bunch of, I still had to experience life in so many other ways so that we could continue to move forward. But I didn't share that. Like, I shared a post about my mother-in-law passing, but I didn't share the most painful parts, the parts that, like, kept me up at night, the parts that, hurt me the deepest. And sharing that, and just putting it out there, is very, I don't want to say therapeutic, but it's just like this release of, like, okay, I this is something that's hurt me so bad, but just being able to just say it out loud now. I think that it's it's hard to put into words, really. Actually, Tim, it's hard to put into words what it is. I'm sure there's, in another language, there's a word for it, but we don't have it. But it's um yeah, we all go through those most painful parts. We all have those painful parts of our lives, and we hold them deep inside, and we plant them. And mental health is one of the things that affects so many people. It'll affect most people around the world in some way or another, in some part of their life. And so the more empathetic we can be, and the more loving we can be to others, the better, because we never know when it's going to be us that is feeling those feelings of, you know, stress, of tension, of panic, of anxiety.
And man, and I, brother, I'm sorry. Like I did know when she had passed, but I did not know the story behind it all until I read it last week. And man, my heart just, it goes out for you. But I do think
Yeah.
expressing it is like letting pressure out, right? Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
making yourself a little bit lighter,
Mm-hmm.
just to be able to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it so that you can verbalize it, but maybe also hear it, but it also lets you know that somebody's listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you're not sure if they are, if you put it out there though, maybe they are, and then maybe they can relate, and then maybe when the time is there, they can pull up alongside you and give you a hug when you need it. um so I got to ask you, you started going to a therapist. How valuable has a therapist been for you to help you process some of the things you've been holding in and the things you've been dealing with?
Yeah. It's I've been seeing therapists for a long time. And the therapist that I have now through the VA, she is the most amazing. I hope that when I'm 80 years old, I'm still seeing her, because it's is so impactful in my life in so many ways. When I first started going to therapy, I went to therapy right away. Like as soon as I found out it was PTSD, or it was panic attacks and stuff, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. I want to talk to somebody because I need to get this figured out, and I want to move forward in my life. Because one thing that's always been very important to me is that, since I first found out I had panic attacks and PTSD and all that, is that I wouldn't make it my identity. That I wouldn't speak it into existence as being a part of my life and who I am, and more so just something that I'm going through. If I had something going on with my heart, I would say, hey, I'm going to go get the medication. And I'd also be okay with telling everybody, right? Like I'd be okay with like, hey man, I'm taking this meds because my heart is, my heart's a little weak. People like, oh my gosh, but I would never, it'd be hard to say, hey, I'm going to therapy, I'm going to see a therapist. And people would be like, what's going on with that? Why are you doing that? Right. But so I wanted to make sure that it wasn't part of my identity, and I've never made it a part of my identity and who I am. It's something it's a journey that I'm on, that mental health that I'm winning. And so being able to talk to somebody, talk therapy is huge. There's EMDR, there's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. The EMDR is you look at the light, as it moves side to side. I wrap with your rapid eye movements, and there's a lot of different ways that you can work through this, with a therapist. But it's like medicine, man. To go and just to share, it's like taking something when you're got a headache and you take Tylenol and and your headache starts to feel better. You go in, you talk with somebody, and you start to feel so much better. And I remember reading things about, very successful people who have said like, hey, I see a therapist. And I'm like, well, if Tony Robbins sees a therapist and he's like a therapist, a lot of people, maybe, maybe that's, something that's important that you should do. And so I'm a very strong advocate of therapy. I just had a therapy session this morning. Every Tuesday, I have my session, whether I'm in person or when I'm on the road for work. I do it, video call or call in on a phone, and just being able to express what you're going through. And even if you can't express it, you don't know how to express it, just talking about it leads you down the path of being able to relieve some of that pressure, and find the next steps. Because when we're in our own heads and our brains are going all over the place and we can't think of, the right next steps, or we can't we're having trouble processing things that have gone in the past, having a therapist is a very important tool, and it's one that I use every single week, and I encourage everyone to as well. Even if you're like, hey, I didn't work on an ambulance, hey, I didn't experience all that trauma. We've all had things, and just going and talk to somebody, it can help you actualize your goals better. It can help you move forward in your relationships. It can help you move forward in your work experience. Like there's so many positives to going and connecting with somebody else.
That's awesome. For you with this new mission, uh, what's next? Where are you going? Where are you going to take this?
Yeah, the great question, Tim. I that's still unclear, where I'm going with it, but I'm excited about where it could go, in the sense of like really all I'm want to do right now is just share, and just be um I don't want to say a beacon, but just be a someone that, you know I don't it's hard to say exactly, like, because I don't have anything written down of like, I want to turn this into this or that. It's just I just feel so strongly that many of us are afraid to tap into parts of us that we don't know how to control, or how to fully experience, because we're scared of what might be on the other side. And a great quote that I love, that I feel like it should be tattooed on my body. Two quotes is one from Joseph Campbell is the cave we try to enter holds the treasures we seek. The cave we fear to enter holds the treasures we seek. Right. And then the other one is just show up. And so those are two things that I've always tried to live by. And my therapist has actually used those quotes on me in therapy, where I said, I said, I told her, I said, I have all these things and I want to share them, but I don't know, like if I should. I don't know when I should or how I should, and it's been holding me back for a long time. And she's like, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And I was like, oh, I can't believe you just said that. But
There's your
she's like, you're
sign.
right. You're right. I'm gonna do it. Right. Well, the thing is, when you experience so much trauma, and you see so many things like that, like it feels hard to share because I don't want to push down anyone else's trauma or make mine feel bigger than anyone else. Because when you like, as a firefighter, you see so much stuff and people are like, oh man, I had a really bad day. Let me tell you about the guy that cut me off at work. And you're thinking in your head, like, I don't know if I want to tell him about what I saw yesterday, or, or like, I don't want to share that because there's a lot more gruesome details that go into what my eyes witnessed, and so we just hold that back because we don't want our traumas to supersede anyone else is going through in life. I feel like, um, so what's next with is just to continue to share and just to show that, hey, like you can still live a successful life. You can still actualize your goals. You can still move forward and be a person of influence, whether it's just in your family or beyond, and have PTSD. Like I am my role with the Disc Golf Pro Tour is Director of Health and Sports Performance. I'm the safety director. So I do emergency action plans. I do all kinds of things in professional disc golf. And people would think, well, somebody that had panic attacks and PTSD, they shouldn't they be in a dark room with a blanket over their head and and just the TV illuminating their face and they never leave their house. No, you can still be successful in what you want to in life and have gone through things and have gone through and talked to therapists and have gone through trauma and tragedy and all that. And I don't have panic attacks anymore. I haven't had for years. I don't have really a lot of anxiety anymore. I haven't had for years, but that's because I did the work and I went through the therapy and I did the not making it my identity, and I did the meditation. I did the movement through original strength and all those kind of things that really made a huge impact in my life. And so that's, I guess, my one thing that I want to get out the most is that whatever we've experienced in our life, our story, it's not our present and it's not our future, right? And we can't be tied down to that. There's so many reasons. There would be so many good reasons why I should not be where I'm at in my life. There's a lot of probably people would say there's a lot of valid reasons why I say, hey, I lay at home on the couch all day and I don't do anything successful in my life because let me tell you my story and how much trauma and tragedy I went through. And there's gonna and I found that having that story, but moving forward from it by using tools of being able to share with people and being able to do the mindfulness and the movements and all that, we don't have to be stuck where we're at. There's a lot of people that are stuck where they're at because they don't know how to share. I've had people reach out to me since I've made posts that I worked with on the ambulance and the fire department, called me and said, man, that resonated so much with me. I'm so messed up right now. I don't know how, I never tell my spouse or my friends anything that I'm going through. And they just want to talk because they can relate. Right. And so it's like, it's so hard to hear that we keep that stuff in and we don't feel like we can talk to anybody about it. We feel trapped in those memories, trapped in that trauma. And that doesn't need to be the way. It doesn't need to be the way. One last thing is like, we hear people we think about people that are traumatized, or hear about people with the stigma words, and we of panic and anxiety. We think maybe they're weak people, they've got a weak mindset. You as a firefighter, me as a firefighter, ambulance, Coast Guard, like we did not have weak mindsets. We were not weak people, right? But we've experienced these things. And just like other people have experienced other traumas in their life that weren't on EMS. But so having panic attacks or having anxiety or any of those things that are you feel burdened by, that you can't really explain, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're frail. It doesn't mean that you're soft, right? I could go in and have all that trauma in my life and still run in and try to be there for my mother-in-law at the moment that she needed me the most, right? Because I was there to do a job, and I was there to try to protect her and save her the best I could. But it wasn't all that stuff's not a weak mindset, right? So that's another thing that we think about with mental health, is that people that go through those things, they're weak or they're soft or they're fragile, and you're not. None of you are. Anyone listening to this, you're not.
Amen. And I think so health is health, and we are designed to be healthy, and we deserve it. So if your physical health is poor, you try to right that ship, right? Like you go to a doctor, you go to a trainer, you go to you do whatever. Maybe you start YouTubing to learn how to exercise, but you do something. It should be no different. If your
Yep.
mental health is poor and is not where it needs to be, you should do something. You should maybe go to a therapist, maybe find a good book, maybe talk to a friend, but you should do something. And there's no shame in that, because we're all designed to be healthy.
We are. And there's this is that, there's a good book, Wired to Care, that I read a couple years ago. It's talking about empathy in business and empathy in life. And it talked about, a cobbler a long time ago made the best shoes because they walked the same streets as everyone else around them, and we don't have as much empathy for each other anymore and what other people are going through, because we're living in the same area, but we're not walking the same streets. And if a tribe was attacked 1,000 years ago, the entire tribe, didn't matter what your status was in the tribe, you were there to fight and defend, and or whatever you had to do. Everyone went through the same experiences. Where in this day and age, where we don't go through a lot of those same experiences, and so we fill those islands between each other. But mental health is important. Take care of your mental health. Recognize that talking to somebody is a good thing. Like you said, whether it's a book, whether it's a person, there's good online resources. There's online therapy, that you can get, where there's apps on your phone where you can connect with mental health professionals. I can't recommend it enough for people.
So, Seth, before we go, I've got a feeling that you're going to enter the cave and show up a lot. So right now, people want to just keep tabs on you, and they're curious about your journey. Where can they go on Instagram or wherever to keep up on you?
Yeah, great question. So like my Instagram is Disc Golf Strong. So I work in professional disc golf, and I have another company called Disc Golf Strong, which is Disc Golf Strong. It's like fitness for disc golfers. So you can follow me on Instagram there, Disc Golf Strong. I'm going to be talking about it on there, mental health. If you can follow me on Facebook. I make all my mental health posts public. So if people wanted to follow me on Facebook, just Seth Munsey, and those will be public posts if we're not already friends. And I'll also share on something on there as I continue to move through this journey. Not sure where it's going to end up, but I'm going to be sharing more stuff. And if I end up putting together another page about it, about mental health and all that, then I'll post it on my Facebook page. So you can follow me at Seth Munsey on Facebook as well.
Awesome. Hey, Seth, thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here always with you. And anyone that's listening, I got love for all of you. And yeah, I hope that that life no we know life can be challenging, but it's not our story. That, I guess, that's what I'll finish with. Your story is not your present, your future. All right.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now get outside and play.